Hello Year 2, welcome to your reading comprehension for today. Now this reading comprehension is going to be a nice quick one because on Monday in your English lesson you actually had a bit of a comprehension about a fact file, so we're just making sure that we're keeping our skills on the boil with this one today. Now for our reading comprehension today, we're going to be looking at a text, and when I show you the text, I want you to decide whether it's fiction or non-fiction. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, to warm up our reading brains, we always like to start with a skim and scan game. So I'm actually going to show you an image that you might not have seen before actually, because I found it and it's something that I want to play a quick skim and scan game with. So if you're in school, then maybe when I ask you to find something, one of the adults could let you come to the front and have a little look closer at the picture. But if you're learning from home, you've got a first row seat because hopefully you've just got it on your screen now. And I'm going to ask you to find some things for me. So I might say, find and point to Winnie the Pooh and Piglet hugging. And if I was playing this game, I would obviously point to this picture here because they're hugging in that picture. Okay, now in case you're not sure of any of the characters, the bear in the red jumper, that is Winnie the Pooh, and the little pink guy is Piglet. And then there's Tigger, the orange tiger who loves to jump around. Eeyore is the blue donkey, just in case you're stuck. Okay, so I might ask you to find a character. I've actually just seen another character out of the corner of my eye hiding somewhere, so I might ask you to find those in a second. Okay, I would like you to find and point to the birthday cake. Find and point to the birthday cake. Have you found it? There it is, top of the screen. Find and point to the blue bird. Extra points if you can find all of the blue birds. Off you go. There are 3. Okay, I'm going to ask you to find another one for me. Find and point to a teeny tiny kangaroo. Find and point to a teeny tiny kangaroo. And the last one, find and point to Eeyore with a sign on his back. He's got a sign on his back and it says 100 acre band. Find and point to Eeyore with a sign on his back. Okay, I'll quickly go through the answers then. So we had Pooh Bear and Piglet cuddling. We had the birthday cake. We had 3 birds, the 3 bluebirds. I think that's all there is. We had the small kangaroo at the bottom of the screen, and Eeyore is here with the sign on his back. If I've missed any out there, recapping them, I'm sure that you'll remember where they were. I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. That's a really good game that you can play. You could always come back to this image if you finish this comprehension early, and you could play that with a grown-up or a sibling, somebody at home. Okay, our text today is, well, what do you think? Is it fiction or non-fiction? The history of Winnie the Pooh. This text is non-fiction, but it's about a fictional character, isn't it? It's non-fiction, it's information about a made-up character. And we're going to be reading the text today, the history of Winnie the Pooh, together. And I know what you're probably thinking, whoa, that's a lot of writing all on one page, but I've done it like that. So if you're printing it out at home, that you don't have to use lots and lots of pages to print it out. And actually, I'm going to read it on the screen anyway. So if you do need a bigger copy of the text, it'll be on the screen for you. So we're going to read all about the history of Winnie the Pooh. Now, this type of text should be one that you're familiar with now. It's providing us with information about something. We could call this a fact file because it's giving us information about Winnie the Pooh, isn't it? It's a non-fiction text about a fictional character. Well, let's jump on in and read the text. Before we do that, actually, because this is non-fiction, there are some subheadings in the text. So if you've got a copy of the text in front of you, maybe on your table, as I'm going through this little activity now, you could be doing it at the same time as me, because it's quite small to see on the screen. So if you've got a copy, that would be super helpful. There are some subheadings. The first one is over here, and it's called Who is Winnie the Pooh? So it's going to provide us with some information about who Winnie the Pooh actually is. And then there's another subheading that says In the Beginning. So I imagine that that's going to tell us the history, like we're thinking about the history of our superhero. This will provide us with the history of Winnie the Pooh. It moves down like a newspaper. I've done this before for you, the top then the bottom. Then the next one says the other animals. So we've just looked at some of the other animals in that skim and scan activity. So it's going to provide us with some information about them. And then there is this subheading called A Bear of Very Little Brain. So maybe we'll find out whether Winnie the Pooh is a smart bear or not. And then there is some information about the character, so about Winnie the Pooh. And then the final subheading says his 90th anniversary. So Winnie the Pooh has recently celebrated being created for 90 years. So those are the subheadings. I just wanted to draw your attention to them because we're thinking about fact files and information, and I thought that would be quite useful. Okay, now we're actually going to read the text. I'll just point out again, just before we start, that because I've put it all on one page, we are going to read it down the page rather than left to right. We're going to read down like a newspaper column and then the top of the next page. And then I've just put a cute picture at the bottom for you to look at as well. Okay, the history of Winnie the Pooh. Who is Winnie the Pooh? Winnie the Pooh is a well-loved teddy bear that was created by the author Alan Alexander Milne, or A.A. Milne as he is known. If something is well loved, then it means that lots of people like it, if something's well loved. A.A. Milne wrote the stories about Winnie the Pooh and his friends for his son, Christopher Robin, after he heard Christopher inventing voices for his toys. Maybe you do that with your toys, maybe you invent voices for them. A.A. Milne named the boy in the book Christopher Robin too. Ernest H. Shepard did the beautiful illustrations for all the storybooks. In the beginning. At first, the teddy bear that Christopher had was called Edward Bear. However, during a trip to London Zoo, A.A. Milne and his family met a Canadian black bear called Winnie, who they were allowed to feed. Wow! The bear had a sweet tooth and liked condensed milk more than meat. That's unusual. Christopher Milne loved the bear, and so Edward Bear became Winnie Bear. So he decided to change the name of his bear from Edward Bear to Winnie Bear because he loved this Canadian black bear so much. The Pooh part of the name was then also added on. It came from a swan called Pooh that Milne had met on holiday. Wow, so he's actually changed the name of his bear and called it Winnie the Pooh based upon two real animals that he'd met, Winnie the Canadian black bear and then Pooh the swan. I also just want to go back to what it said here about Ernest H. Shepard doing all the illustrations for the books. That reminded me of another author that we've looked at in the past. We've looked at Roald Dahl in the past, and he had the same author illustrate all of his books, Quentin Blake. So that was something that in my mind I know is similar between A.A. Milne and Winnie the Pooh and Roald Dahl, because they use the same illustrator in their books, Ernest Shepard and Quentin Blake. Not the same guy, but two different people, but they do all the illustrations. Okay, let's have a little look at the next part of the text. Okay, the other animals. The other animals in the 100-Acre Wood were also toys that Christopher Milne owned. These were Tigger, Piglet, Eeyore, Kanga and Roo. A.A. Milne also included Rabbit and Owl, but these were from his own imagination. So the little boy, Christopher Robin, didn't actually have a rabbit and an owl. He had all of the others, but Those were from his dad's imagination. The toys which the stories are based on are now in the New York City Museum in New York, USA, and there they are. You can see them on the screen right now, and they're very, very old now, but actually the museum has looked after them so much that when you go to the museum, you can view them in their glass case, and they're so lovely to see. I'm going to read this fact here in blue. A. Milne wrote Winnie the Pooh in 1926, The House at Pooh Corner in 1928, so there were 2 years between writing his books, and also 2 very famous poetry books called Now We Are 6 and When We Were Very Young during the 1920s. So A. Milne doesn't just write the Winnie the Pooh stories, but he writes famous poetry as well, and he wrote the first story in 1926 and the second one 2 years later in 1928. A bear of very little brain. Winnie the Pooh, or Pooh Bear as he is usually called, doesn't think he is very clever. In fact, he calls himself a bear of very little brain. However, he is a very thoughtful bear and always somehow manages to sort out problems without really trying, because he has a lot of common sense. So, although Winnie the Pooh thinks that he isn't very clever, he actually must be very clever if he can solve all the problems, mustn't he? Okay, the character. Winnie the Pooh is a sociable, that means he likes to talk to friends, is a sociable, friendly and kind-hearted character. He helps others and encourages those who lack confidence. Like Piglet, he visits Eeyore and takes him a birthday present, even though Eeyore is often miserable and doesn't seem very grateful. Oh dear. Pooh allows Rabbit to take the lead, even though he knows he isn't always right. And he listens to Owl talk about everything he knows, which is a lot, and doesn't ever interrupt. He is kind, isn't he? Pooh even built Eeyore his own house of sticks to keep him warm in the snow. Pooh enjoys his snacks, or elevenses as he calls them, and can often be found at one of his friends' houses around that time for a jar of honey or some condensed milk. He is dependable and loyal, and he thinks up very good poems, or hums as he calls them. Final subheading, his 90th anniversary. 2016 marked the 90th anniversary of when Winnie the Pooh was created by A. Milne. It was also the year in which Queen Elizabeth II turned 90. Wow. In celebration, a new Winnie the Pooh book was written called Winnie the Pooh and the Royal Birthday, where Pooh meets the Queen at Buckingham Palace. I haven't seen that one. I'll have to get hold of that. That sounds brilliant, doesn't it? So it celebrated its 90th anniversary, 90 years of being created. Okay, now we're going to look at the first 3 questions together as a group, and then I would like you to write down your answers. Okay, so the questions say, who is A. Milne? What made him write the Winnie the Pooh stories, and who was Ernest H. Shepherd? So let's go through those answers now, and then you guys can have a go at writing them too. Okay, question number 1, who is A. Milne? Well, it told me at the top of the text who he was, but I'm going to read the top of the text again, just so I make sure that I answer it correctly. Winnie the Pooh is a well-loved teddy bear that was created by the author Alan Alexander Milne, or A. Milne as he is known. So the question says, who is A. Milne? Well, he is, I'm going to write the author, I will show you in a second, the author of Winnie the Pooh. The author of Winnie the Pooh. That would be my answer to question 1. The author of Winnie the Pooh. You might want to pause the video. You might want to write down the answer. The author of Winnie the Pooh. I know that it's quite small, but I've said it quite a lot now. So hopefully you can write that down. The author of Winnie the Pooh. Okay, question number 2 says, what made him write the Winnie the Pooh stories? So we're going to actually need to read on. A. Milne wrote the stories about Winnie the Pooh and his friends for his son, Christopher Robin, after he heard Christopher inventing voices for his toys. I'll read the question again. What made him write the Winnie the Pooh stories? I'm going to write my sentence. They were for his son, Christopher. 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 It tells us that in the text, doesn't it? Pause the video here, write down your answer, and we'll move on to question 3. Okay, question number 3 says, who was Ernest H. Shepard? And it tells us Ernest H. Shepard did the beautiful illustrations for all the storybooks. So I'm going to write, he was the illustrator. Now that is a super tricky word, but I can use illustrations that's on the screen to help me write that. He was the illustrator. Your writing will be much neater than mine. He was the illustrator. Pause the video here and write down your answer. Amazing job. Now, for this part of the comprehension, you can either choose to complete the rest by yourself, or you can listen to me. I'm going to go through 4 more questions. I'm going to go through 4 and 5, and then 6 and 7. But if you feel a-okay and super confident, you can carry on now. If you still want my help, then keep listening to the video. So number 4 says, how many years were there between Winnie the Pooh being written and the second book, The House at Pooh Corner? Now, when I was reading the text to you, I actually told you the answer to this question, how many years there were. And I'm going to read the part of the text again, and then you guys can write the answer. So it says, A. Milne wrote Winnie the Pooh in 1926 and The House at Pooh Corner in 1928. So he wrote the first one in 1926. This isn't our answer, we're just going to work it out. And then he wrote the second one in 1928. Now, that means then between the 2 books, there were 2 years. So you would simply just need to write down to number 4, there'd need to be a finger space. I've not got one. 2, oh, that's a rubbish E, Miss Buckley. 2 years. It's very hard writing with this. 2 years. That would be the answer. I'm going to try and fix that E. That would be the answer to question 4, 2 years. Okay. Pause the video and answer the question. I'm going to move on to number 5. Explain how Winnie the Pooh got his name. Now, actually, the answer to this question isn't in this part of the text, so I need to get rid of that, and I need to bring up the part that gives us the answer to this. Okay, so it says, explain how Winnie the Pooh got his name. However, during a trip to London Zoo, A. Milne and his family met a Canadian black bear called Winnie, who they were allowed to feed. The bear had a sweet tooth and liked condensed milk more than meat. Christopher Milne loved the bear, and so Edward Bear became Winnie Bear. So how did Winnie the Pooh get his name? I'm going to write Winnie the Pooh got his name from, so I would need to write Winnie the Pooh got his name from, I'm going to try and write it on my board, Winnie the Pooh got his name from, maybe you wrote that at the same time as me saying it. Winnie the Pooh got his name from a Canadian black bear called Winnie, and a swan called Pooh. And a swan called Pooh. A long answer, but it's still the right one. Winnie the Pooh got his name from a Canadian black bear called Winnie and a swan called Pooh. Feel free to pause the video and you can write down your answer now. Winnie the Pooh got his name from a Canadian black bear called Winnie and a swan called Pooh. Pause the video, write down your answer. Okay, I'm going to go through the next two questions, but I'm not actually going to write down the answers. I'm going to just tell you where to find them, and then you guys can think of what you need to write, okay? If you're struggling with the next four questions, so with these two and the two after that, please stop there, okay? Because you've worked through a lot of this comprehension. So if you're finding the last four questions a little bit tricky, that's okay, because they are tricky, but I would like you to have a little go though, okay? So let's look at the next question. Which animals in the stories did Christopher Robin not actually own? So I need to look at this part of the text where it says the other animals, and when I read it, it tells me which animals Christopher Robin didn't own, which ones were from his dad's imagination. The other animals in the 100-Acre Wood were also toys that Christopher Milne owned. These were Tigger, Piglet, Eeyore, Kanga and Roo. A. Milne also included Rabbit and Owl, but these were from his imagination. So which animals in the stories did Christopher Robin not actually own? Rabbit and Owl. 3 words. Rabbit and owl. Rabbit and owl. Pause the video and write down your answer. And then the next question on this page says, what do you think it means when Winnie the Pooh is described as being a bear of very little brain? What do you think that actually means? A bear of little brain. So if somebody might be called a little brain, what might it tell us about the size of its brain? It might mean that it's small, mightn't it, and not very clever. So for your answer, you could write, I think it means that Winnie the Pooh is not very clever. We know he actually is, but that phrase there, a bear of very little brain, might tell us that somebody might not be very clever. So I think it means that Pooh Bear isn't very clever, or something along the lines of that. Okay, so pause the video here and write down your answer. Okay, now there are 2 more questions that I'm not going to talk about. I'm just going to read them out loud to you. And if you're feeling a-okay and confident, I want you to answer them. If you're not feeling confident, I don't want you to answer these 2 questions. Okay, so you've got to make that decision now. What does Pooh have that helps him sort out problems? And name 2 kind things that Pooh Bear has done for his friends. So what does Pooh have that helps him sort out problems? Think about the type of person that he is. And then number 9 says, name 2 things that Pooh Bear has done for his friends. So think about the 2 things that he's done. I can think of one straight away from the text where he listens to Rabbit, and Rabbit likes to tell him all of the things all the time. So I know that he listens to Rabbit nicely. Okay, only answer these 2 questions if you're feeling super confident. Remember, if you're not feeling super confident with this activity, then don't answer 8 and 9. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Lovely listening. Just before I go, reading this text, and when I found it for you, it actually reminded me of this beautiful book, and I think it's quite new. I'm not sure if it's new or old, but it's called A Boy, a Bear and a Balloon, and it's the story of Christopher Robin. You can find it on YouTube, so mummies and daddies don't need to go and buy this book for you, but you can find it on YouTube. It's 16 minutes long, so it's a really nice story time. book that you could listen to, and I actually think lots of you will enjoy it. So there we go, that's my Miss B recommends for this week's comprehension, for today's comprehension. Thank you for listening, everybody, and I'll see you very soon.